Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Campfire Guide to Parenting. I am your host, Mike McDonell, president of Kid Venture. And the last time we had a great conversation about raising kids with real world skills. Today, we're talking about something I think every parent is really wrestling with, especially today, and that's connection. The question I keep coming back to is, do they actually know what real connection is? So today, we're getting into how we raise kids with real connection in an age that competes for their attention all day long. And to talk about that, I'm joined by Justin Marler, musician, former monk living in Alaska, co-author of the book Youth of the Apocalypse, and a dad of two girls. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited about the discussion.
Your story is really fascinating, and I believe your background, I don't think I've met anybody that has such an amazing, varied background like you. Describe what you were living in Alaska when you were a monk.
Sure. I was 19 when I entered the monastery. I was a monk for 7 years. Alaska, they sent me up there, and it sounds like a banishment, but it was actually a privilege to live the hermitic life on a remote deserted island near Kodiak Island. And so we had no electricity, no running water. We were literally carrying buckets of water from the stream up to cook with and to brush our teeth with and everything. We were chopping firewood. We were building. We were wrestling logs out of the ocean. We tried not to chop down trees unless they were already dead. But that was our lumber. That was our way to build the monastery cells for the monks and the main chapel and so on. And we were out there the average was four of us, two of us at a time. At peak moments, we would have youth groups come out. Young men would come from all over the United States and fly up there and live out there for a couple of weeks with us and live the hard life. And it was amazing. Some of these kids, I still have connections with them. They're now adults.
Amazing. So
And
the
they're
bumper
greatest memories
sticker,
of that.
so the bumper sticker live simply, dude. You like to exemplify that, right?
100%. When I was in high school, I was forced to read by my English teacher a book about a guy who did this very thing. And after reading it, I was sold. I wanted to try that out, and I got to do it. And I have to say, first year was extremely difficult,
Yeah.
but also internally difficult because when there's no distractions, and this is going to kind of into later what we're talking about, when there is nothing except you and a bald eagle and a stream, the ocean, and another monk, you're forced to face yourself and all the trash that you put in yourself over the course of your life. And it's shocking. There were times where an airplane would be flying over and I would praying to God that somehow I wished I was on that plane flying out of there because the sheer starkness of facing yourself is overwhelming, really. But after I clocked a year, I saw it all. My prayer life, my interior life deepened, and my connection with God and nature, everything became like nothing I've ever experienced since then. Absolutely amazing.
Well, and you're right. It does come back full circle. It seems like so many of us, including our kids, live in this life that's so full of attention getters and noise and all this stuff. You live the opposite of that, right? In the sense, man, there had to be long periods of time where it was just quiet, right? And there was nothing else going on but your thoughts and everything happening around you in nature, right?
Yeah. This brings up a quote that I put in my newest book that I'm just writing called The Art of Unseen Warfare. And the quote is from Mr. Rogers. He says, "We don't give our children the gift of silence enough." And he talks about the importance of silence. This is, child raising. When I left the monastery and had a family, I tried to raise my daughters as little nuns, and it didn't work. I wanted to share with them this experience, but the world is so strong, and it just didn't work.
Right. Well, let's get into that because I want to focus our discussion today on connection, right?
Yeah.
I want to bring that around really to our kids. And I think I want to start off with a little bit of story and background on my experience as a kid. So growing up, my dad became a pastor. Now, and that shaped our house in kind of a big way. It wasn't just church on Sundays. It shaped kind of talked about at the dinner table, how we handled right and wrong, and honestly, how we connected and felt as a family, right? Now, prior to my dad becoming a minister, he worked as an executive for John Deere. I mean, two completely different lives. And he was gone a lot traveling. And I remember I resented that as a kid. And I think I resented that because I had a lack of connection, with my old man, right? I wanted him home more and he wasn't home. He was gone. And I think it was about in fourth grade, my parents sat me and my sisters down and said, look, we're going to move to Austin, Texas, because your dad's going to go to seminary and he's going to become a minister. All right. Like mind blown. Like this came out of left field. So we packed up the car, drove down to Austin, Texas. He put himself in seminary there for 3 years, became a pastor, and that's what he did for the rest of his life. He's retired now. But really, that was a pivotal moment in our life. And that set in motion, I think in many ways, it set a lot of things in motion. But one of the things that set in motion was this affirmation of connection. My dad felt a need to be connected in a much different way than he was when he was an exec for John Deere. Yeah. And I want to take you back. What was it about your childhood that you can remember growing up, maybe that shaped you early? And where did you first learn about connection? How did that feel for you?
Well, that's interesting. I don't want to go dark on you right out of the gate, but the worst thing that ever happened to me was when I was 3 years old, my parents divorced. So talking about connection, the family unit was split apart. And then there was remarriage and there was new building of families and there was this blended family thing. And so connection has been something that has been hard for me my entire life because of the initial divorce and then the subsequent relationships and rebonding with new stepmothers and fathers and all this kind of stuff. So connection was tough, but the nugget that I had with my father is that I knew he loved me. And he always would say to me, my dad never said, I love you to me. And that's why I say it too much. And he always made a point of saying, I love you. And I remember distinctly him wiping the tears from my eyes when something went wrong in my life, or whatever. And he just he'd wipe it away and say, I love you. He was a flawed man. He had lots of issues that I don't want to go into, but the little amount of love that he was able to give in his own dysfunction was the connection, the thing that really got me through. And so when I grew up and got older and we were teenagers and he went through another divorce, I was 16, I knew he had my back. I knew he loved me and had my back despite all the dysfunction.
You bring up an interesting point. I think as kids, obviously we need that connection from our parents, but we don't need much, right? And every kid's situation is different. I think about how many kids, what is it? 1 in 2 marriages ends in divorce. I don't know how many kids that impacts, but there's a literal break in connection with parents when that happens. Fortunately, I didn't have to go through that. My parents have kind of out. It's been tough. There's no doubt about it all along that path. But the one thing that I remember about the most that sort of sticks with me is my parents, and I think like your dad, right, was this ability to always tell your kids that you loved them, right? And it always kind of glue in my house that really held us all together. I had parents that were sort of with their emotions, right? That could be good and that could be bad. But when it was good, it was usually because there was a lot of love to be handed out as well. So I guess I've realized in my own life, like that I can be physically present with my kids and still not be connected, right? And I think a lot of times we think just because we're together, we're connected. And I think that's even more challenging now today, I think because of technology and a lot of things like that, right? You can be in a room, but you can be distracted, be moving fast, but not really be connected. So when you think about connection with your kids, what is it actually, right? And what does that look like when it's strong? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Experience with that is that it's evolved. When they were younger, I went on bike rides with them. I took them down to the Capitol building. We had an ultra ball, giant ball, kicking around, frisbees, always going on, I call it adventures. I would tell them, hey, let's go on an adventure. And we would just go and I'd let them direct where they wanted to go. Let's go to 6th Street. Let's go to the Capitol. Let's go somewhere different altogether. But over time, as they start to become teenagers and develop relationships and they're in high school, they drifted away from me. And I learned, and I wish this was in a book that I could read somewhere that would warn me that the connection you're going to have with them is going to fade. When they reach a certain point, they drift away. And right now, 18 and 21 are my daughter's ages. And she came and visited this weekend, and it brings joy to my heart when she's around. My daughters are around, but they don't, I'll take you to lunch. I'm sure, Dad, but they're gone the whole time with friends. Right. So craving the connection more now. And they don't have it so much, but when they're in distress, the first person they call is their dad.
Yeah.
With my stepchildren that I essentially raised, we're a blended family too. I have 3 stepchildren. Same thing happened, but as they turned 20, 21, 25, they become my best friends. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
My stepdaughter, the oldest of all of them, I'm very close with her. And I never would have predicted that. So there's seasons in parenting that I'm learning, and I have to be there as a reliable rock whenever I'm needed. But I can't force myself on them. I can't force the connection right now.
Yeah, it's so good to hear you say that because I struggle with that in my life with my kids, right? But if I think about it, it makes total sense, right? You raise a kid when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, man, you're a hero in their life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
they
want nothing more to go play ball with dad and that kind of thing. They hit 16, 17, and they check out from you, right?
Yeah.
But I checked out from my dad too. There's almost this thing that happens where they've got to prove themselves as an individual. And part of that proof as an individual manifests itself in sort of away dad and pushing away mom at times, right?
Yeah.
So now my kids are 28. My oldest two are 28 and 25. And now it seems like at about 24, 25, they start to come back to you, right? I think they gain enough confidence and independence. They're kind of in their own skin enough to come back and re-engage you. And I'm loving that, by the way.
Yeah.
But man, there were some painful times in there. And I think what I learned after my oldest, was that let them go, right?
Yeah.
The more that you try to force it, the more that you try to get them to connect with you when they have that period of time where they need to be on their own, the more I think it pushes them away. It's always good to hear another dad speak the truth of somebody else. You know what I mean? All right. I want to talk a little bit about this connected world, right? Talked a little about why it's important to be connected, how your family connects with one another, and how my family connects with one another. You know, at Kitcher, I see kids who are great kids, but they're carrying a lot of anxiety. We've run summer camp for 32 years now, right? And I've seen camp in 1994 and I've seen camp in 2025, right? And I will be honest with you, I think our kids today carry a lot more anxiety and a lot more disconnectedness with the world than they ever had before. I just think technology is a big part of that. What do you think constant stimulation does to a kid's inner life? What do you think it does with their patience, their gratitude, their ability to be present? Because it seems like to me that there's so many things competing for our kids' attention, right? And that pulls our kids in so many different directions, doesn't give them the opportunity for that stillness that you maybe experienced in Alaska. Talk to me a little bit about that, Justin.
Yeah. So I'm 50. So I've seen technology in my generation, how it's evolved from Pong, the game of Pong, to current video games and phones and communication, internet, all this stuff. And I think it all goes back. You can have technology, but we're not training children, to know what their interior life is and how to think and how to feel. There's no course in high school that talks about your interior self. And I think that if a person understands their soul, they can better judge what the outside world is affecting them. But if they don't have those tools, you follow the trends, you follow the patterns of what's happening, like just jumping into AI quickly. I have a lot of apprehension about this next stage of technology, but there is yet a study that I have to come across that says all of this technology is good. All of the studies that exist say that this is harmful, yet we still march blindly into it without caution. Having lived in Alaska, which is the exact opposite, and having to live in the modern world, it's so apparent that the natural way of living, the simple way of living, the lack of technology is the way, it's the way of life that is natural for the soul. And this technological infrastructure that we built is not natural for the soul, which is why depression, anxiety, suicide, drug addiction, all these things are skyrocketing because people don't feed their soul. The soul is being starved to death. So our job as parents is to try to bring them up and help them learn how to make money and all that stuff and change a tire and all that stuff. But at the same time, we have to help people understand how to think and feel, how to understand what our thinking and our feelings are and what they're doing inside of us. Because depression, I was listening with someone just yesterday. Depression, as I was growing up, it was taught as a thing that you are inflicted with. You have depression, you suffer from this, and it's validated. In the early church fathers and in the monastic tradition that I come from, they taught that depression is not something that is natural for the soul. It's actually something you can control. There's a physiological component for people, for sure, but it actually is something we can control. And when I learned that when I was 19, I don't have to be a victim of my depression. I can fight it.
Right.
Like in the monastery, we teach this unseen warfare, this spiritual warfare that really should be a masterclass that everyone takes because it brings you back into your soul and into your life. So you understand your thoughts and your feelings so you can battle with these things that are destroying us. And the technology is a component for sure. But if we have the training in these other areas, the technology is not interesting.
I think you hit on a really important topic, and you're calling it soul. I'll call it soul interchangeably with consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of books, The Untethered Soul, for example, or there's a lot of authors that really address this. And I love this. It's that we raise kids not to have this foundation to understand who their true self is, right? And instead, what they believe is what they see in the external world, right? It's what their life experiences have been. It's what people have criticized them about and the hardships in life. But we all know that we have this self because we know it's there because we can witness everything that's going on around and we can judge those things. But we don't really connect kids with that consciousness or with that soul very much. And you're right. Technology is not going to go away. Technology is only going to get greater. It's only going to be expanded, right? I think giving our kids the tools to navigate the world of technology and navigate that external world by teaching them about the self, right? About who they are as a person, irregardless of what's happening on outside of their eyeballs, right? Is so essential and so important. So how do we as parents do that, Justin? How do we help teach them about their self and about their consciousness? How do we get them to be in touch with their soul so that they can fight off depression, so that they can fight off the external criticisms and not judge themselves based on what other people think of them, but judge themselves based on who they believe they are inside?
I'm Eastern Orthodox Christian. So in the East, Jerusalem, Greece, Russia, all these areas are all Orthodox. And so they have basic fundamental teachings that are built into their culture, society, the church, group, community, whatever. This goes back to the Greek philosophers. The virtues were so important to the Greek philosophers for a really good reason. Plato's Republic, he talks at length about the Republic. A healthy Republic has virtue at the top of the pyramid, virtue. And these virtues, love, gratitude, kindness, and then I'm getting to the most important one to answer your question, detachment. If we are able to train our children to have life at its richest and fullest, but also be detached from it, that's the sweet spot. That's the virtue of the Greek philosophers and the early Christians that is so vital. And it's the key to the modern problem. So here's a good example. The person that wishes that they had a marriage or a wife and they don't have that, they suffer.
Yeah.
The person that wants children, but they can't bear children and they desire that, they suffer. The person that is gravely sick and it's chronic and they want health, they suffer. But the more we let it all go and are detached from it, the more life finds its plane, its baseline, and you accept these things. I have this illness, or I don't have money, and I have no way of getting money. Therefore, I'm going to be fine with that. This detachment is what we need to teach the children. This little nugget right here is what produces happiness in people. And that little detachment leads to gratitude, which leads to kindness, which leads to compassion. There are several words in Greek for love. Philo, brotherly love. You have sacrificial love, which is agape, which is the most important one. You have eros, which is sexual sort of desire. But agape is the one. This is not taught, and it really should be taught to children. That there are different ways of love. And agape, the sacrificial one, is the higher one. And that's what that's the pinnacle virtue right there. That's the pinnacle virtue. Christ talked about it. The two commandments, love God with all your heart, mind, will, and love your neighbor. It's all right in there. But we can't love if we're attached. As I was raising my children, being a person who spent 7 years in the monastery, obviously detachment was something that I learned. I've never mastered it. I'm always working on that. We all are always going to be working on detachment. But I raised my kids to understand the importance of detachment. So here's a good example. My daughter comes home from school and she's upset because a boy was making fun of her. And I said, let's look at this a different way. First of all, don't go into your feelings of being upset by him. Don't let that happen. You don't need to feel upset. So I said, think about this. There's something in this boy's life that's causing him to be this way. There's something happening. She comes back the following day from school and says, I found out he's being raised by his grandmother because his parents, both of them, are in jail. And I was like, that's the nugget. The boy is hurting and he's taking a little bit out on you. So let him do it. It's okay, whatever. And in the meantime, love him back. And she came back. She's like, my relationship with him is great now.
I think that's an excellent way to frame any situation where a kid is being criticized, being hurt. I mean, to me, there's only two things in life when it comes to emotions and people. There's fear and there's love. And they are the opposite, right? And that foundation of giving our kids, look, I could ask my kids if they would sit down and meditate me for 20 minutes, right? They're all going to look at me like I'm completely nuts, right? If I make that ask of them. I think one of the greatest ways I can impart what I think that I know now at my age that I didn't know when I was their age is to be an example for them, right? Is to do it myself. And when I'm not doing it myself, when I'm not being mindful of myself, when I'm criticizing other people for things that I should be able to handle internally, right? And not let things affect me and let things go off of me, then I'm not being an example for them. And I'm guessing you're the same way, Justin. I think probably it begins and ends with you when it comes to parenting for your kids, right? And that example, talk to me a little bit about that.
A wise man once said, every day, get up and preach the gospel first to yourself and then to the world by your actions. In that statement is what you're talking about. And the tricky part is, okay, so I tried to be the best parent I could be. I tried to make all the right choices, tried to teach them well, tried to train them up. I made a lot of mistakes. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes. And this is where what you're talking about is important. You also model your mistakes and how you handle them to your children. So if you make a mistake and you pretend it wasn't a mistake, they're not stupid. They see that. It's actually some of the best moments where I connect with my children is in those moments where I make a mistake, I get angry about something, I lose my temper, or I get frustrated and irritated by them. And then I come back to them and say, look, I'm really sorry. Your dad was wrong. Something at work is bothering me, and I got frustrated with you, and I'm sorry. I please accept my apology and forgive me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my daughters inevitably would hug me, say, I love you, Dad.
I agree with you. I think it's probably one of the most powerful actions a parent can take is to be
100%.
vulnerable and admit when they're wrong.
Yeah.
Because if truly we're going to teach our kids that they need to create their own reality, and we know that we're infallible beings and we're going to make mistakes, we've got to be able to embrace those mistakes, take ownership. We have this thing called in our house called own it, right? If you did something wrong, if you said something inappropriate to a person, you have to own that. You can't let that go away. You got to make that thing right, no matter how you do that. But if you and I don't show our kids how to do that in the first place, it's going to be very difficult to teach and instill in them and impart those kind of things as well. I want to shift a little bit. I want to go back to my dad because you made me really think of something that is important. He was a minister, right? But I'll be honest with you, when you're a minister's kid, there's a duality there that you have to live with. One of those is that, hey, your dad's a minister, but you don't want to be seen as a minister's kid. There's this term, I think people called me PK when I was a preacher's kid when I was young. Yeah. And that came with this moniker that I couldn't always be holy and abide by all the rules. I had to push back a little bit. And that's just part of being a PK. And certainly I'm positive that I pushed back maybe a little bit too much at times because of my dad's title as a minister. But he demonstrated to me, right, by his own actions and his own word, he made mistakes, but he was really a very humble guy. And he demonstrated to me that we're not perfect and we're going to screw up. And when we screw up, we need to make that right. And we need to apologize for that. I think that's one of the things that my dad gave me, this gift, right? To be humble, right? Yeah. And to recognize that we're not perfect and that that's just something that's always stayed with me, right? How do you keep faith, right? You're a faithful guy, right? This is a big part of your life. How do you keep faith as an anchor in the home? Talk to us a little bit more about that. Something that brings peace and depth without turning it into a pressure or a mask. Because some kids will really push back against religion, right? Yeah. Some people will, for whatever reason. How do you balance that out with your kids and have them develop a faith while not making that pressure cooker type situation?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I've obviously been thinking about this for 21 years. My oldest daughter's 21. To not make it, to not force it too much, but also to have it be natural. But at the same time, I have a commission to raise my kids with faith. I would do a great disservice if I didn't raise them with a worldview. Deliberate worldview building is what we're talking about. Deliberate worldview building. And I have friends that say they didn't build a worldview in their children. They let them discover the world to themselves, and it's a lie. It's impossible to not raise your children with a worldview. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to deliberately raise them with a worldview. So religion and religious topics and storytelling, talking about the virtues was a constant thing in our life and still is to this day. My wife and I are co-strugglers, and religion is the glue for our marriage. And we are always talking about things through the lens of faith, always. Right. So it's really unavoidable in my house. It's the center topic. So now I have a 21-year-old daughter who is agnostic, totally raised in the church. She was actually the youngest kid in the history of this church to actually be involved in the choir. She was like 9 or 8 when they let her sing, but she's an agnostic. And my other daughter is really faith oriented. And it's really weird to see the two. Mm. They're choosing how they want to view the world now. And I have to say, my 21-year-old is miserable and not happy and struggling interior wise. And there's numerous reasons for that, not just the lack of faith life, but the other one has a structure that she can resort to, which is this faith. And it's got her through a lot of rough stuff. Like her mom committed suicide when she was 5. And she has a really nice way. Her name is Sophia. She has wisdom. That's her name, means wisdom. She has wisdom in this because we talk about meaning, faith, purpose, God's will, and trusting in God through thick and thin. When it comes to her mother committing suicide, we have this discussion every once a year about this. And she says, I can't control it. There's nothing I control about that situation because it happened
Yeah.
and that's that. So
Right.
I don't worry myself with it. I pray for my mom's soul, and
It's pretty powerful, man.
I raised my kids with a faith-oriented worldview, and it's
Yeah.
just I couldn't see it any other way, honestly.
That situation is a really tough situation. Not every kid has that to deal with. And I'm really impressed by the way she tackles that. I do feel like, and I want to stay with this thread, I feel like the world right now for a lot of people is so chaotic, right? There's so much disconnection in general, whether that's in our politics or in our culture, the way we treat one another, the way we
Yeah.
can't have civil discussions with one another. Do you think that kids pick up on this like never before, right? I mean, you and I were kids, right? There were 3 TV channels, right? And maybe we got a little bit of news, and now we're inundated with everything. Everybody knows what is going on, good or bad, right? And it just seems like it's news is more negative, right? Do you think the way the world is right now and how kids perceive that draws them closer to try to finding an answer like faith?
I will piggyback on what you just said. Our world that we've constructed here right now, the world that we exist in is not only not conducive for healthy spiritual growth, it's actually highly counterproductive for spiritual growth and nourishment. We've created a system that is absolutely toxic for what the interior, the soul needs, the consciousness. So now we're plunked down into this thing and it's actually getting worse. Like I said earlier, the depression, suicide, anxiety, addiction, all these things are increasing because of all of this. And again, it goes back to the virtues, Plato and the virtues, and that quote from Mr. Rogers, silence. And the more that we eradicate these things, the more people are starved. And to come full circle back to the last point, yes, I have people daily reaching out to me endlessly that are 100% dissatisfied with modern life and their life in general and how things have unfolded. And these are people from addicts to very successful people and the whole gamut, the whole range. They're seeking. Absolutely. There is a generation of people that are absolutely not subscribing to the modern thing and want something more. And they often can't articulate it. There's a lot of people right now that are coming to me that are getting out of the occult. And I think the occult, it's luring for that reason. It has mystical answers to questions. And then they find orthodoxy or whatever, and they find me online and they want to ask what we have here going on. And the amount of people that are seeking, my little church has doubled in size in 2.5 years.
Right.
So yes, statistic alone. And I talk to a lot of priests throughout the US, and they're all having the same problem. Their churches are doubling in size in 2 to 5 years.
Because that doesn't surprise me. And I really honestly, people always talk about the younger generation in a lot of negative ways. I really have a lot of faith and hope for this generation that's growing up right now that's having to go through all this. In many ways, I think being a kid today is a far more challenging and toxic opportunity than it has ever been in the history of mankind. But I also have a lot of hope. I see thousands of kids every summer at all of our camps, and I get I get a pretty good feel for who they are and what they're about. And really, kids haven't changed. They all need the same things. They all want to be loved. They all want to be accepted. They all want to be part of something bigger than themselves, right? But man, it's really difficult to do that in an environment where adults are making it so hard to really find oneself and really be at peace with oneself. And that's disheartening for me to think about that. But at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of kids, even my own daughter, right? She has made decisions to increase her faith, to be part of things that are productive, that make the world a better place instead of a negative place. And I think a lot of kids her age, look, and she's 19, right in there, right, are feeling that right now. And whether they go to the church or they go to a Young Life meeting in the evenings, whatever, I think all these kids are searching for, at the end of the day, who they really are in their soul.
The way I would word it is purpose and meaning. Every human being wants these things, purpose and meaning. And everything in our culture, everything, news, media, entertainment, movies, TikTok, is meaningless and purposelessness. And so, yes, these young people, I went at a conference a couple weeks ago in Dallas, and I ran into a priest that I knew when he was 16. He's a great example of this. He was 16, long-haired, backpack, counterculture kid, and he's a
Right.
priest now. He was I remember talking to him at Life many times when he was 16. He was that kid. I don't subscribe to the modern thing. I want
Yeah.
something deeper. And he wanted it so bad, he's now the priest in California.
That's amazing. You strike me as a guy who really values relationships with individuals and try to keep up with people, man. Talk to me. Why is that important for you to do, by the way? What is it about you that holds those relationships with the people that you've had with yourself over the course of your life? Why is that something that you seem like you're very intentional about?
I firmly believe that we are all connected. So if somebody hurts, I hurt. And I had a person yesterday reach out to me that is a drug addict that is hurting. And I hurt with him. And I tell these people that when they reach out to me and say, pray for me, I have such and such going on, that weighs heavy on my heart for days. And it translates into prayer, good intentions, which reaching out back and saying, hey, how's it going? I had a kid in the military reach out to me a few months back. He said, I want to kill myself. Give me a reason why not to. And I gave him this little job to do. I said, tomorrow, this is your job to stay alive. All day tomorrow, have a piece of paper and a pencil and make tick marks how many times you have a negative thought about yourself. And he called me back the following day. He said, oh my gosh, 35 times. I had negative thoughts about myself.
Yeah.
And I said, now the next day, every time you have a negative thought, replace it with this thought: God loves me. And he did it. And he had 14 negative thoughts. And then
That's
he did it
awesome.
another day and he had
Yeah.
almost none.
Yeah.
And then he called me and he says, I'm actually praying a lot and I'm happy. So this is what I
Yeah.
live for. There's a little thing in the Bible, 2024. I live for this. This is what I live and die for. And so while I have breath, I want to try to help people and be a positive thing in the world.
It's great,
Because I'm
man.
going to die. We're all going to
Love
die.
that. I love that. Yep. So I want to shift a little bit. We've talked about kids today, the challenges they're growing through. I think a particular challenge has to do with our girls too, as well. You and I both have daughters, right? And
Yeah.
I've raised two boys and I've raised two girls. I'm still raising two boys. And I feel like, particularly with our girls, it feels like the world is constantly selling them an identity, a particular way to be seen, a particular way to be validated. I think it's particularly hard culturally and socially on our girls. So, how do you help? I want to hear from this because I know we have our listeners that have a lot of daughters, right? And they struggle with the
Yeah.
same things that you and I have. But how do you help your daughters build an identity and a self-world in that environment that I'm referring to and stay connected to what matters? And I want to talk specifically about as that relates to being a girl.
So obviously, when they were younger, I tried to shield them from social media and internet, all that stuff. When they were really young, it didn't even exist. But I remember the moment when the iPhone came out and my wife, who's since deceased, gave it to them. But I've always tried to instill in them a detachment from their own appearance, to not worry about it so much and to not let people judge you about your appearance so much. The world, the pressures from that, from aesthetics and from how a woman should be, are so great that I couldn't fully keep it at bay. It still infected them through school
Right.
predominantly and
Right.
through the expectations in school, that they spend hours and hours and hours in school and they get indoctrinated with these beliefs about beauty and celebrity and all this stuff. But all I could do is just raise them as a dad. I love you as you are. One of my daughters is extremely pretty. And when she learned that she was pretty, I had to really talk her out of that. She learned very
Right.
fast that, oh, attractive people, doors open. People
Yes.
do what they want. Don't fall for that. Always wash their feet. Always be the person that wants to help and wants to,
Yeah.
when you show up at somebody's house, friend's house, ask the parent, hey, how can I help? And they did that. They actually were good at that. So I tried to gear them towards gratefulness about who they are as an individual,
Right.
regardless. And also, I put a healthy distrust in them. When we would sit and watch these movies, as you do as a parent, and there'd be a Disney movie with a very beautiful, perfect looking girl, Pocahontas or whatever it was, Little Mermaid, and I would totally tear it apart. I had no problem saying, this is a lie. This is not reality. Don't subscribe to this. The story's fun, but this little perfect girl is not a reality. And my daughters were super smart and seeing past that stuff
Yeah.
because I was a cynic with it.
Right. I've got two beautiful girls inside and out, but the struggle has been for one of those is just to, as beautiful as she is outwardly, she still struggles with that really being the case, right? And not feeling great about herself.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And every day they're bombarded, swipe
Mhm.
left, and every image is of this ideal, perfect, beautiful woman or girl out there. And it's really hard for our girls to understand that real beauty is on the inside, not the outside. To feel confident about oneself is the ultimate thing that you want to try to instill in your kid. But the same thing too, and there's this double-edged sword, and it's hard for me to explain this. I don't want my girls also to feel like they are a particular case too as well. Boys get to skate through a lot of stuff that girls maybe don't get to skate through. But my
Absolutely.
girls should also grow up as confident as possible so that they can not
Yeah.
only navigate the world of girls and women, but navigate the girls of boys, more importantly, I think, too, as
Yeah.
well. They should be raised and they should be confident enough not to know that they are a strong, capable, beautiful woman, but a strong, capable, beautiful human being, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I
Yeah.
think maybe sometimes we focus on them in terms of being girls so much and not necessarily in terms of being human beings as well. Are you with me on that?
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
hard. I'm
Absolutely.
having a difficult
100%.
time kind of explaining that, but I want my girls to know that I don't care if it's a guy or it's a girl. Your ability to impact the world and make change and be a presence in the lives of
Yeah.
others has very little to do with you being a woman, but you being a human being, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's true. But my daughters were very women, girl oriented.
Yes.
And even when they were 4 and 5 years old, I would always tell them, you are a strong, independent woman. Don't let anybody ever tell you different. And to this day, both my daughters are stubborn, strong, independent women. And I did it. I pulled that off.
It manifested itself for you, man.
I want to tie something back to what you said earlier, though. You were just talking about confidence and talking about how to raise them with that, and also the vanity that our world produces or is projecting onto them. Tons of vanity. Vanity is vainglory, and vainglory is pride, and it's taught in my system with the monastic tradition that I was from. Pride and vainglory are not healthy. And you said it earlier, humility. The two pinnacle virtues in the monastic life are love and then humility. They go
Yeah.
together. Raising our children, whether they're boys or girls, with a strong case of humility.
Right.
Always serve others. Always be the helper. And this is back to Mr. Rogers too. He says the exact same thing: is put the other people before yourself. Always. The compassion is bursting forth, and both my daughters have that built into them. And I'm proud of them for that.
I think one of the most powerful ways my wife and I have been able to teach humility with our kids is by giving back, right? Is by volunteering our time, by going out in the community, by participating in the lives of others. I think
Yeah.
that not just, I don't think that that necessarily just creates humility.
Yeah.
It creates it's probably one of, at least in my family, one of the more powerful ways to create greater sense of leadership as well
Yeah.
too, a greater sense of accomplishment. When we
Yeah.
give back to other people and we help improve the lives of other people, there's a feeling there that you don't get from making money, from winning the lottery or anything else like that. And I think, at least for us, that's been one of the ways that we address humility too. Because I think we live in our neighborhoods, we live in our communities. Those neighborhoods and communities become such a bubble.
Yeah.
Not everybody has the opportunity to travel the world and see other people and have a different perspective. But one of the ways we can do that is sort of by giving back and by volunteering, whether that's at the local food bank or whatever.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me into the next thing that I want to talk about, because in these discussions at Campfire Guide to Parenting, one of the things we always want to do is we want to leave parents with practical ideas, ways to help them move their kids through life, right? And so I want to narrow that down with you a little bit. You've got such an amazing, expansive background. You seem to have applied a lot of that to how you raise your kids. What's one simple practice, and maybe it's more than one, that parent can do tonight that help builds connection, right? To get our kids connected and brings a little bit of faith and calm back into the home.
That's a great question. I think that answer also has seasons in it through parenting. The answer is different when they're younger than it is
Right.
now. This book that I just finished writing, The Art of Unseen, I wrote it for my daughters, and it took 20 years plus to write it. In the introduction, I talk about this very thing. The main principle that I want them to know is that the world and all this stuff, it fades away. It all goes away. What really is meaningful is what you're talking about right now: connection, people, family, love. These things are the most important. I raised my daughters with prayer as a component of our life, and it was only beneficial. When we would, every evening and every morning, we would do our little thing, our little prayer rule. And even when they didn't want to, we would be standing, doing the prayers, and they would be holding onto my hand or my leg or my arm. Even if they were tired and didn't want to, they would, it almost created a bond. I didn't want to do it, but now I'm kind of happy we're connected through this prayer practice. Prayer is, I don't think the modern man understands the not the importance of, but the necessity of prayer, of this time that we devote. In the monastic tradition, we have three components. Our soul has anatomy. This is really amazing. Our soul has anatomy just like the body does. The soul has three powers: heart, mind, will. Those are the three things that are activated inside the human person, according to the monastic tradition that I come from. And when we feed those three things correctly, we are super healthy. And
Right.
the thing that feeds all three of them really well is prayer. So if I would encourage anyone to do anything, is to develop a healthy prayer life, even if it's short and simple, consistent prayer life with your kids. It only, even to this day, my daughters have only good feelings and thoughts and memories about the prayers that we do.
You make me think of, it's not a prayer because camp is in a secular kind of environment, but we do a
Yeah.
similar thing. And especially with our older kids, we call them, I'm not older kids, I'm talking like 13 to 16 years old. We always end our day with this little debrief thing, and we do this thing called apples and onions, right? And the onion is share with everybody in the group something that bummed you out, was a negative thing, something you didn't like, was uncomfortable, and then let us know something that you really felt you connected on. And man, almost always the kids are like, "Can we keep going?"
That's cool.
Right? And I think the reason for that is kids don't have an opportunity to connect in that way. Both on telling their parents that they had a great day or opening up to something that really bummed them out, and just having that opportunity to have other people look them in the eye and understand that and use empathy and provide opportunity for feedback. It's just like, I feel like kids are thirsting for that so much today. And so one thing I think that all parents can do is, first of all, and I've said this in several podcasts, have dinner together, sit
Yeah.
around a table and break some bread and look at each other, right? And then use that time to connect. And maybe apples and onions is the way you do it, or you pick a topic for the evening. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're giving your kids a chance to not be on their phone, not be with
Yeah.
anybody else, look you in the
Yeah.
eye and one another, and connect on whatever they really want to connect. Because it's that act of connecting that makes them feel empowered and valued and loved. You know what I mean? And I just think we
Yeah.
need to give that more to our kids.
Yeah, we did raise my daughters with a thing called search questions, which is very similar. You ask these search questions and it triggers a discussion. We would raise our kids with a lot of board games. And board games are an amazing way to loosen up the mind and heart,
Right.
because you're interacting and it's not a screen and it's pieces and there's a little bit of challenge to it and you want to win. And at the same time, discussions are just flowing. Board
Yeah.
games are like, they need to be praised more and spread more.
Totally agree there. We love board games, by the way. It's a big hit in our house. We're also, the McDonald's are very competitive people, Justin, too. So sometimes that can go
Yeah.
sideways as well. But no, I totally agree, man. In fact, like we end up playing board games probably 5 out of 7 nights out of the week
That's
now.
great. That's good.
Cards or
Totally.
board games. And I find that to be a really great way to connect with my kids, you know? All right. So, Justin, if you don't mind, man, and this is kind of a new thing for me on this podcast, I want to do lightning round. I want to fire a bunch of questions at you. I want to give me short answers. And I really want to pick your brain a little bit, see what's on the top of your brain and see how you answer these questions. Because I think you've got a lot to offer us. So, are you ready?
Shoot away.
All right, here we go. So, Justin, what's one habit that you've had to kill to be more present as a dad?
Selfishness.
All right. What's your go-to repair line after you overreact to your kids, let's say?
Please forgive me.
What boundary are you glad you set early, even if it was unpopular?
I am not your friend. I'm your dad.
What's one small ritual that keeps your home grounded, Justin?
Prayer and philosophy.
What's the most underrated way to connect with a kid who won't talk?
Ask really silly questions right out of the gate. Ask something super random.
Comedy. All right. What's one message culture pushes that you actively push back on at home?
Just do it.
What do you want your daughters to believe about themselves?
No matter what, God and your dad love you and would die for you.
And what's one thing parents can do tonight that actually moves the needle?
Tonight, call and ask about your boyfriend, which I don't like doing.
All right, man. Hey, Justin, It has been a true pleasure to hang out with you and to share some time and get your insight on an incredibly varied background and how you bring that to your kids and your daughters. I really do appreciate your time, man. I know you've been struggling a little bit with some pneumonia too, as well. So even more appreciative of you getting on here and not coughing up a lung and hanging out with me. And hopefully, what we shared today will go a little ways to help our parents be a little bit more intentional in their own family setting, man. So thank you so much.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
You bet. If you missed our last podcast, you might want to go back and check that out. We interviewed Michael Blaisdell, who's a principal of a middle school. Scary, right? We talked about real world skills. I had an incredible conversation with him. He also has daughters, and we applied what he has done in the school system and what he does at home. It's an incredible conversation. It's one I think that you'll benefit from and find a lot of reward out of. Thanks again for tuning in to Campfire Guide to Parenting. I'm Mike McDonell, and we will see you next time.